Hello and welcome to day 5 of the Academic Hype Research Bootcamp. Today, we're going to be talking about research methodology. So, research methodology is the how of research. So it's that part of your research that explains how you intend to go about your study, how you intend to answer your research questions or achieve your research objective. So I have here that research methodology simply refers to the practical how of any given piece of research. More specifically, it's about how a researcher systematically designs a study to ensure that valid and reliable results that address or answer the research questions are achieved. A good research framework can guide you in the process of developing your research methodology. There are quite a number of research framework depending on certain fields, but here is a standard framework that can be used across any field of research to a large extent. It's the framework by Saunders et al., what we know as the research onion. So the research onion, as you can see, it's onion shape in nature. And you start out with the first layer, just like you have an onion ball, okay? When you peel out the first layer, what happens? You have another layer, you peel it out, you keep going in, until you get to a very small, manageable size. Same thing with the research framework. You start out with the research philosophy, and then you go ahead to uncover the approaches, and then the strategies, the choices, the time horizons, as well as the technique. The research onion can help you organize your research in a logical way. For the purpose of this bootcamp, we will use the elements of the research onion to explain the research methodology because it's quite robust and kind of covers almost all aspects of the research methods or methodology. Let's start with the first part of the onion, the research philosophy. So knowingly or unknowingly, as a researcher, when you want to start your study, you already be having some number of assumptions. Assumptions here are like your tour guide. Okay, so you already have something in mind that is telling you how you conduct your research and why you want to conduct your research in a certain way. It will tell you what your role should be in your research. Do you want to be very objective about it? Or do you want to do a research that you can bring in your own position? That's subjectivity, okay? So the research philosophy explains one method, or they can guide you on the method you can follow when you're gathering your data, when you're analyzing your data, and when you're using the data. What are the facets of the philosophy? So the research philosophy comprises of three aspects: ontological assumptions, epistemological assumptions, and axiological assumptions. The ontological assumption is concerned with reality. That is, to you as a researcher, what is real to you? For your research, what is that thing that it's reality to you? Or what makes something reality in your research? How can you understand existence? Epistemological assumption has to do with knowledge. So for epistemological assumptions, you're thinking about your research in terms of what do you want to know from your research? How do you want to know it? That thing that you're going to know, how do you want to transfer that knowledge? So epistemology is concerned about knowledge, while ontology is concerned about reality. Axiology or axiological assumptions are assumptions that are concerned about the level of your influence as a researcher on the research process. That is, what are your values as a researcher and how does it influence the research process you want to undertake? So it kind of guides, it helps you to know what is essential or what is valuable in your research and what may not be valuable. So the three main point here is that for your research, ontological assumption deals with reality, epistemology deals with knowledge, and axiology deals with values. So most times in social research or in business research, we are faced with epistemological assumptions most of the time because we're concerned with how do you want to know. Let's say if I want to use an epistemological assumption to carry out a research or to carry out my research on, let's say something on still aviation, okay, aviation marketing. I want to see what people feel about um, the current services offered at the international airports in Nigeria. The epistemological assumptions I would consider is that, do I want to be part of this research? How will I want to know? For me to get knowledge, for me to get the data, I mean, do I want to be involved in the research? Like, do I want to also put myself as a participant, okay? Or do I want to just look at it objectively, take myself away from the research and just allow the passengers to express themselves? Or do I want to just, observe as if I'm not researching, but I'm there? So these are forms of getting knowledge, okay? So epistemology has to do with how you get knowledge. Okay, so this is kind of represented here, the faces of philosophy. So reality, which is ontology, deals with how you know, and it's also used in metaphysics, or it's concerned with metaphysics. Um, Epistemology deals with how, okay, reality deals with what you know, epistemology deals with how you know, and axiology deals with why do you know what you know. So let's see some real life scenario. Are assumptions important? Well, if you're a graduate student, it's optional, okay? It may not apply to all institutions, but some universities or some departments might tell you that it's best you go for a quantitative research method. And you should try to use a probability sampling so it can be as objective as possible. Try to avoid qualitative method. So those kind of suggestions are due to differences in assumptions. The research committee may feel that your research should always be objective. They may be very concerned about the objectivity of your research, such that they tell you, no, this is how you should follow, or this is what you should do, so that you are very objective about your research. We don't want to see you bringing in your own views or your own, points inside. Just tell us how it is and explain it the way it is. So sometimes this is very difficult, or this could be quite challenging if it's a journal you're submitting to. Some journals will tell you they do not welcome opinion research, they do not welcome qualitative research, they want empirical research that has been done quantitatively, things like that. So sometimes it's linked to the assumptions that they follow. So what should you do? Should it be because your department don't like this pattern and then you just follow the normal pattern? Well, you can do that if you know it's going to affect your grade, if you do the opposite. But for a journal article, what you can do is that try to justify your position. If you say you're using epistemology, explain why you're using it. If you say you're using ontology, just explain your position, okay? Just try to justify why you're using that assumptions. Do that clearly, make a case for it, and then you're good to go. Okay, so this was quite a lot of information, and I hope it's quite clear. So, like I said, there are different research philosophies. The first is the ontology, which is the researcher's view of the nature of reality or the nature of being. Now, the different, sorry, these are the assumptions. Ontology, epistemology, axiology are all assumptions, okay? And these assumptions can be applied across different research philosophies. Now, the philosophies are positivism, realism, interpretivism, and pragmatism. If your assumption is that you want to make sure that things are always real, you want to ask yourself, which of the philosophies should you use? Should you go for positivism? Positivism shows that you want to just be external of that research. You don't want to bring in your own view, okay? You want to be independent of the research, like of the social actors. Let's say your respondent, for example. You don't want to be part of the respondent. You want to view it objectively. Realism, yes, it's objective. You exist independently, okay? But then you're interpreting it through social conditioning. Interpretivism shows that reality is socially constructed and it may be subjective. It may also change, okay? The way you come, it's not, I want to go into epistemology already. So it shows that reality is socially constructed and is subjective. Pragmatism explains that reality is external and it can be reality, there are different views of reality. What is real to one person might be different to another person. So there are different views that are chosen to best enable um, the way you answer your research question. Well, the truth is, all these do I say isms, the positivism, realism, interpretivism, pragmatism, well, they are very linked to the field of philosophy. So somehow they could be really confusing, okay? They could be really, really confusing. So I'm gonna drop this in the attachment below. So you take some time to go through them one by one. So we first of all put the assumptions against all the different philosophies. So you can know when you read the philosophy, if it appeals to you, if it seems like what you want to work on for your research, then you know that you are adopting that assumption against that particular philosophy. Maybe the data collection technique section here below can help. If you are looking at collecting highly structured large sample data, and you want to measure your work quantitatively, okay? Not like you can't use qualitative though, but you're largely being quantitative, and then it's highly structured. You're going to use a structured questionnaire or a structured way of collecting data. Then your research may be linked largely to positivism. If your methods are thinking of fitting, methods chosen must fit the subject matter. So if you want to use methods that align with the subject matter, that align with the concepts you're investigating, whether it's quantitative or qualitatively, you're just trying to be real, okay, what your research is about, and you just want to use methods that align to it, then you can go for realism. What if you're working with small samples? You don't want to investigate a large number of people. You just want to investigate maybe 5, 6, 10 persons, and you want to ask deep questions. You want to get data from them by asking deep questions. Then interpretivism would be your preferred philosophy. How about if you're looking at mixed method design? You want to use both quantitative and qualitative approaches to getting your data or finding answers to your research question. You want to look at multiple views. Then pragmatism is your ideal research philosophy. I hope I tried to explain this to the best of my ability. All right, so let's say we have peeled off the first layer. The second layer is the research approach. So the research approach is generally the orientation on how your research is conducted. There are two basic types of research approach, the deductive approach and the inductive approach. So for the deductive approach, you observe the issue you want to solve, or the social phenomenon, or the phenomenon you want to observe, okay? You just observe it. Then you think of theories that can explain why that issue is like that. You think of theories, okay, existing theories to explain it. And then you come up with a theoretical framework and now test the theory to see whether it is true or not. So your theory is tested, okay, to see whether you want to accept that existing theory or whether you want to reject it or whether you want to revise it. That is deductive approach. In inductive approach, yes, you still examine the issue you want to solve. Now you first collect data. You collect data on the possible reasons as to why this occurred, the trends, the things that are happening. You collect the data. At the end of the day, you now come up with a theory. That's after analyzing the data. You now observe the pattern in the data and then come up with your own theory to explain the issue that was observed. So the difference here is that in inductive, a theory is already developed, whether it's in form of a theoretical framework or you're using existing theories already. And then you test the theory. In inductive approach, you first of all try to gather data to explain the reasons, possible reasons why this happened and why that happened. Then from the findings, you develop a theory. Research strategies. That's the third layer. When you've decided on whether you want to use an inductive approach or you want to use a deductive approach. Once you've decided on that, the next step you go to is the research strategy. So the research strategy comprises of various approaches to the research. It can be an action research, it can be a survey, it can be an interview, it can be a systematic literature. Whichever style of research or whichever strategy you want to use to respond or to find answer to your research question, that is your research strategy. So here are some of the research strategy that can be used and their approaches, whether you want to use a qualitative or quantitative, and the cost of the research, the time frame that will be involved, and some other comments. So if you're using a secondary research means research that is more like desk research, okay? You don't need to go to the field to collect any data. You don't need to go and observe something. You already have the information, maybe online or already in a repository, and you want to just examine those information. It can be qualitative research, it can be quantitative research. Now, they're typically free or low cost. And with secondary research, you spend quite a relative short time, and it's a good place to start, but it's not very detailed or it's not very specific enough. That's secondary research. You just do review papers, you just want to see what like you said, it's more like the kind of literature review kind of thing, you know. You just want to see what the research looks like, what the discussion look like. So kind of systematic literature review falls in this secondary research because you're dealing with knowledge that's already existing out there. You're just reanalyzing those knowledge. So sometimes it's detailed, but it may not be very detailed enough, okay, or specific enough for you to use or to make some kind of generalization about it. How about surveys? Surveys are always quantitative, okay? And then the cost, well, the cost will depend on whether I want to pay people like research enumerators, whether I want to pay to design the instrument or to administer the instrument, or whether I want to incentivize the participant, people that respond to your questionnaire. You can give incentives to some extent. It's acceptable, but it all depends, not all the time. And then surveys take quite a medium amount of time, and they're a good way to start if you're looking at examining a large population or a large sample. Then you have focus group, you have interviews, you have experiment and field trials, as well as observation. So experiments are usually quantitative. Interviews are qualitative, focus group are qualitative. Focus group is good for exploratory research. Interviews as well is good for exploratory research. And then it goes deep down to answer or to provide answer to specific research question. Experiment and field trials, they are used to test hypotheses, and it's the most expensive research method. I mean, those in the sciences would attest to how much they usually have to spend to get samples. So it's usually very expensive. Field trials or clinical trials are very expensive. Okay, observation are quite medium. You spend medium amount of time doing using adopting observation, and then observation are good for measuring actual behavior as opposed to self-reported behavior. Like you're measuring the actual thing. So it's not just what the participant wants to tell you, like in surveys, they'll tell you, you ask a question and then they tell you what they want to know. For observation, you're already seeing it. So you're measuring actual behavior. So we also have these other types of research strategies: phenomenology, ethnography, narrative inquiry, case studies, and grounded theory. So from this infographic, we've tried to um, present the purpose, the disciplinary origin, and then the data collection analysis for each of these strategies, as well as the research report, what it should look like. The fourth layer is the research choice. The research choice, I mean, it's up to you. It's for you to decide. Do you want to use a mono method? Do you want to use mixed method? Do you want to use multi method? So that is, do you want to combine it? But it largely has to do with deciding on whether you want to combine qualitative and quantitative methods. So if you just want to use a single method, whether qualitative alone or quantitative, then it's the mono method. If you want, it is the mono method rather. If you want to collect data as a single data set, but it's both quantitative and qualitative. So let's say you ask them, how do you want to rate your perception of a particular issue, and then they say, oh, strongly agree. You now ask, why did you rate it this way? You're expecting some kind of explanation, right? That explanation, that text they'll write for you is qualitative. So when you have it as a single data set, then it's a mixed method. So you have the same set of respondents responding to both your quantitative and your qualitative, okay? So you can have, like, maybe section 1 can have closed-ended question, while section 2 have open-ended questions for qualitative data analysis. So that is the mixed method. For the multi-method or multi-method, this choice is similar to the mixed method, but this time around, you have both the qualitative and quantitative methods, like differently, but within the same research. Why the mixed method has the methodology combined, the multi-method does not. So you can say you want to interview some respondents, okay, maybe the students. Let's say you're trying to examine classroom performance or teaching performance, okay, or teaching effectiveness. And then you want to see it from the student and the teacher's point of view. For the students, since they're just kids, you say, okay, like, you just want to, use questionnaire for them. You use questionnaire for the students. You explain why you're using the questionnaire, what you want to get from it. Then for the teachers, you may use maybe focus group discussions. You now have focus group with the teachers. But when you're reporting the research, you're reporting both things, okay? So you can see that the difference here is that in multi-method, you undertake this research method, the quantitative and the qualitative, in their own rights, but you report it in the same research. But the mixed method, you have it as a single data set. So here's a comparison of qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method research. You look at the characteristics, what's the question type, what's the data type, what kind of analysis do you want to use. So let me say for the analysis, if it's a quantitative method you want to use, you should know that it's statistical analysis only you have to use. If it's a mixed method, you have to do both statistical and text analysis. If it is qualitative method, you have to use just text, or just image. But mixed is both statistical and text. Then how do you interpret it? um, what form of inquiry do you use this for? The fifth layer of the research onion is the time horizon. Time horizon means how long is this research going to take you? Do you want to just collect data at a particular point in time across various sections of the population? Or do you want to take data for a longer period of time? Maybe you want to observe a phenomenon across a specific period of time. So the first is cross-sectional, while the second is longitudinal. So if you are just going to go to the field and just give questionnaire and then you come back and analyze, like maybe just once, that's cross-sectional. Longitudinal means you can give it now, next year you give it again, after you give, you just keep giving for a longer period of time, and then to see what the trend looks like in the response. Then that is longitudinal research. The sixth layer has to do with the technique and the procedure you want to use. So it's like you're concerned with the data source, the type of data, the method of collecting data. So what are some of the sources of data? We have the primary sources of data, which is data that you are collecting directly from the field. Okay, this data has not been collected before. You're the one collecting it for the very first time. So it can be interviews, you can use interviews, questionnaires, surveys. We'll talk about this in instrumentation. But data that is collected firsthand by you, the researcher, is a primary data. Secondary data are data that you did not collect directly from the original source. So maybe they have already been collected by someone, okay, originally. But because they have been documented somewhere, you now go and use that data they have already collected. Then it's secondary data. So I would like to clarify this. If I go to the field to collect data myself, I'm the one that designed the questionnaire, and I go to the field and I collect the data. That is primary, and I'm the one analyzing it. So for me, that is primary data. So if after analyzing it, I now present my data, the responses I got, I present it and store it somewhere where you can access it. Now you want to do something related to my field and you feel that my data can help you. You then go and use my data that I had already collected. So even if it's still a primary data I collected that you are now using, it's not primary data. To you now, it is secondary data because you are not the one that collected it from the original source. So secondary data can still come from databases, okay? It can come from publication, it can come from website reports, it can come from literature. So, but the difference is that primary is collected firsthand. Secondary is when you're using a data that was not collected directly by you. Someone else had already collected that data, and you're using that data that was already collected by another party. What are the types of data? Quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative data are expressed in numbers or it's quantified. Qualitative data cannot be expressed in numbers, they are non-numeric. That is, they could be text, figures, images, symbols, observation. All these are qualitative data because you cannot place numbers, like, can't express them in numbers.